And we are live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Poseidon.
And your co-host, James McVeigh.
And we are Fermenting Opinions, the podcast in search of a more palatable political ferment. Tonight we're talking about the obvious, essentially. We're talking about the gunman in Vegas and the 58 dead, 500 wounded as a result of what I understand is an 11-minute shooting spree into a crowd of something like 22,000 people, and the devastation that's wreaked, and the horror of it, and what is our reaction to it? What is appropriate, and how do we respond as a nation? That's really where this conversation is going tonight. So, does anyone have any initial thoughts?
Pass.
Okay. Go for it, Clarence.
Someone else.
Well, about what James and I were talking on Facebook earlier. I think part of the things that you could ban certain pieces of equipment, like the ability to make the weapons automatic, something like that, or magazine size, or I think that something has to be done because it's obvious. It's obvious with the shootings that we've had that it's way too easy for people to get their hands on things. My idea, I personally feel that military-grade weapons like that don't belong in the hands of civilians. Me being a veteran, me knowing what they can do, seeing what they can do. I just, actually living in a neighborhood, I came up in a middle-class neighborhood, but when I was going to school, I did live in a bad neighborhood with some family members, and I've seen what those weapons can do, even in that aspect. So they don't belong in civilian hands. Kind of down south, I don't know where everybody is, but down south, that's kind of hard to tell people. Because, like you were saying, everybody's going to start screaming Second Amendment and everything, but I just don't see where you need a military-grade weapon to defend your home.
If I may just for a second, I think you hit on a decent point that I think we could kind of put together. High-capacity magazines coupled with any kind of a high rate of fire adapter device like this bump stock system or something like that this man used. I think together you're definitely looking at something dangerous, because if you were to outlaw one or the other and you were to have like a 10-round magazine and a bump stock or something like that, you'd be changing mags every 10 rounds. They'd be gone in 2 seconds. Right. I think you've hit something there. And even outlawing one could fix the other. But I'm going to give the floor to somebody else aside from that. That was my only thought.
One thing I'll say is that I read online, of course, some reactions from, I guess there was some ATF spokesperson talking about these modifying devices that go on semi-automatic weapons, and that I guess before now they kind of regarded it as a gimmick. Saying, oh, this is just, for people to go on YouTube and show how fast they can shoot the gun, and they didn't really take it seriously that there's modifications that you can buy completely legally that'll take a semi-automatic weapon, like an AR or whatever, and make it fire at hundreds of rounds per minute. Some early reports were reporting, between 9 and 10 shots within a matter of seconds. The amount of fire being put out into a crowd, it's a crowd of 22,000 people. So, it sounds to me like it was pretty indiscriminate, that it was just firing into a giant crowd of people, not really targeted at anybody. Something like that was extremely effective. Go ahead, Lace.
Yeah, hearing you say that, David, I just want to kind of gives me an idea, what other type of weapon can a civilian obtain that easily and do that much damage with in that short period of time?
Fertilizer.
Okay. I'm sure there's plenty of things. I'm just curious what. I'm sure there's plenty of things. Fertilizer, what else?
So I have to cut in here because my brother is a little bit of a gun nut. Shocking, living in Texas, right? And he says the same thing. He's like, well, we'll just make a bomb. I'm like, yeah, okay. But that's not actually what happens.
No, it's not. But she asked the question.
But I'm just saying that if you assume with me, just for the sake of hypotheticals, that you did outlaw all assault rifles and all guns that could kill 100, 50, 500 people in 10 minutes. just assume that that's true. Those people aren't going to go through and try and figure out how to make a bomb. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Well,
You don't have to figure it out.
Hey, the psychological profile of a bomber versus like a spree killer is different.
Yeah,
I like that you went there, though. I like that you went there.
Like the motivations are different. Like spree killers like to be able to see their victims, like things like that. I mean, they don't get the same satisfaction out of a bomb.
I like her.
And also the other thing too is like you're giving people too much fucking credit. Like I totally could make a bomb because I have 2 brain cells to rub together to make a spark. Not everybody does, and not everybody has like the mental capacity or the desire to bother figuring it out.
Yeah. Sean, I wanted to ask you the question because we were talking about, or I think David or somebody mentioned how efficient this was. 11 and a half minutes is a long time
To kill 50 people?
Yeah, in a crowd of 22,000 at 1,100 feet away. I mean,
Only.
you almost can't miss. At that point, if you're firing, you're hitting something in that crowd. And Siobhan, you and I have talked about this a little bit earlier. You were saying that you're familiar with shooting and that you're a pretty good shot. This whole automatic thing, I think, actually takes away from the efficiency. How much damage do you think you could do at 1,100 feet from an elevated position like that if you were to just take time and start semi-automatic whipping through a magazine every 30 rounds?
Well, I mean, also take into account the fact that, like, I don't know how experienced of a shooter this guy is, but we all know every time you shoot a round, like, it jerks the gun, and obviously you have to re-aim. I very seriously doubt that he was actually aiming. Like, it sounds a lot more like he was.
No,
he just shooting at the crowd.
Exactly. Like,
If you're firing a weapon at automatic at that kind of range, yeah, you're not aiming. I mean, even if you're firing a weapon up close,
Clarence, I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat that?
It's basically like you're laying down cover suppressive fire.
Exactly.
When you're not really hitting the target. He had so many targets. He didn't have to pick anybody. He could just. I heard it when I was listening to the rounds go off. I mean, from what they were saying, he was just laying down fire. I mean, he had people grouped together. You don't have to pick anybody.
But a crowd that size and people can't get away very fast. I mean, it is a. I hate to say it, but a fish in a barrel type scenario. So it had accuracy had very little to do with any of this. And that's kind of what my is that with a AR-15 or something like that. If you had it semi-automatic at 223 or 5.56, smaller caliber, so it doesn't buckle.
And my eyes just rolled in the back of my head.
Yeah, me too.
Well, my point is that speaking of recoil, like if you were to fire at that rate from that elevated position, you could do a lot more damage than just going full auto. I think that kind of fits the pattern. What I'm trying to get at is I think that fits the pattern of the spree shooter. Most spree shooters, with a few exceptions, are not very well trained. They're not great shots. They don't know really what the hell they're doing. They may have some understanding of the firearm and how to reload it and how to clear jams and whatnot, but they're not aiming for accuracy. They're just trying to cause terror. They're spreading ammo out and just and really scaring people.
So
and they still have an agenda. And what the fuck was the agenda? That's what I don't even care about. I hate to use that word.
Do they really always have an agenda? I mean, what was the agenda?
Well, I'm pretty sure you kill people. You have
something sparks it.
Yeah.
What do you mean by agenda?
I mean, I agree that there's a trick.
Something sparked it. Maybe agenda is the wrong word, but there's something sparked.
Can we segue to that for just a second? I think one of the things that's really
any discussion on why he did it?
The motives. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because this is a guy with no criminal history. No issues passing any background check to purchase legally all the firearms that he used and probably all the modification devices that he used. This guy was under everybody's radar, and yet what he did was completely insane. I think categorically, nobody saw this coming. And nobody, to this moment, nobody knows, and this is still a relatively new and developing situation with regards to understanding why it happened, but we don't know why he did it. We don't know what motivated it. And the only thing people have suggested is that his dad was a bank robber that held up places and busted himself out of jail, and he was a desperado type, from what I've read.
For half a decade.
You know, and all we can do is pontificate and engage in conjecture. We don't know why he did it.
The tower at University of Texas back in the 60s, or was it the late 50s? Nobody's brought this up. That was one of the first things that came to my mind. Did they ever, quote, determine what set him off?
Hang on, wait. I thought that was
Tower sniper.
Yeah.
Yes, back in the 60s.
The bell tower guy.
I know. I went to YouTube. I was just making sure I didn't hear you.
Did they ever decide this is what set him off?
No, but the thing that made him stand out was the same thing with Harvey Oswald, is that these guys were both Marines who knew how to shoot.
But what I'm getting at is motive. You know, the kid in Charleston, most recently, the kid.
Oh,
Roof.
Yeah, obviously he was racist. We've been able to attribute the guy in Orlando, obviously, hate crime. We may not be able to come up with something for this guy, much like the guy in the bell tower at Texas.
Yeah, I think the difference there
that disturbs society.
He actually was proven to have a mental but he was proven to have had some type of tumor that was on his brain that caused him to kill people.
And he literally,
yes.
Okay.
That was proven immediately after he died.
Okay. I think you may get some clues out of social media, which, if we want to go way off left field later, I'm happy to talk about. But I think that we can find a way to classify this as some type of terrorism, so that we can actually access, you know.
I think it's premature to call it terrorism. We don't know the motives behind.
But no.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
whether or not we're going to go there,
exactly stop us from calling it terrorism.
That's what I'm saying. Why is it a terrorism?
Wait.
Domestic terrorism.
I actually wanted to go there with one quick point, just as something. If we can label it terrorism, we can actually use the NSA archives of all that shit they steal from us all the time to come through and actually look at his motives and what he did online and who he talked to. And I mean, we have every phone conversation recorded. We have every email. We have every text message. We have everything. But we can't access that without a FISA warrant that has to do with terrorism. And unfortunately, the FISA warrants are almost always only granted for preventative measures and not to go back and look at something.
Goddamn lawyers.
Right?
Lawyers, homie.
It sounded for a second like everyone was clapping when you said that.
No, that's my hope, is that we can find a way to classify it as terrorism, so we can go back and actually dig through it.
It may very well be, but terrorism, that's a question of motive. That it has to be politically motivated violence. That the idea is to have an effect on a populace of invoking terror for, you know, some sort of political purpose, right?
Yes.
And, you know, I wouldn't have any. Go ahead. I'm sorry, what?
If it's not terror, what would it be?
I think David is getting into like the very technical statutory definition, which is definitely not common parlance. So, I mean, he's saying that it has to be politically motivated, and again, like without something from this guy, we don't know what his motives are. Obviously, with Dylan Roof, we knew that it was racially motivated based on his own statements. So, I mean,
and that is terrorism, absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us are arguing that. Like, that's a very clear-cut case of terrorism. But this guy, like, unless he says something or we find something, I mean, it's...
Well, you can't say so.
Just a minute.
And when I say, like, him saying...
Some record of something, yeah, that indicates motive.
Yeah, or whatever, yeah. Some indication that he said something to somebody else.
I have no qualms about calling a crazy-ass white dude a terrorist. I really don't. But in this case, we don't know why he did it. We don't know if it was politically motivated. That's all it comes down to. I'm not shy about calling him a terrorist at all. I don't think we have that quite yet.
I think in common usage, this guy was totally a terrorist, like based on what he did. But the question is whether he meets the statutory definition.
Sorry, I got wonky on that. Sorry.
NSA records, right?
I was going to say that I apologize. What I'm looking for is I hope that we can find a way to label him a terrorist under the federal legal definition.
Right.
We might be able to use a retroactive FISA warrant to dig through his shit, because if we really have these FISA courts and everything else, shouldn't we be able to use them for something actually useful aside from spying on Americans who do nothing wrong?
Or Trump's
But I
people.
mean, that's a whole other can of worms, and that's why I said left field. And anyway,
Okay, Ed Snowden.
Whoa! I mean, James was like saying everything I was thinking, so there's that.
Yeah. I'm not saying I disagree with Ed, but that's Ed Snowden.
it is. That's why I like Ed Snowden.
Yeah.
Fine with that guy. But that,
Actually, tangent.
left field. We're too far left field. Let's talk about this fellow, though.
Yeah, it's something, you know, another thing that's important to point out is that according to his family, according to his brother, no idea where this came from. You know,
I think it's bullshit.
I agree. I mean, I feel like people, they say that because they don't want to feel responsible. Yeah, I mean, and they don't want to feel responsible. Like, Dylan Roof's family said the same shit. And I was like, you didn't know your fucking kid had joined a neo-Nazi group and was, like, planning out the, like, murder of people for months?
And also, yeah.
Man, when they interviewed that brother, I felt like that brother was on pills. The way he was
acting. Well, and he
was way too hyper.
Very well been prescribed anti-anxiety. Probably losing
Didn't the girlfriends?
Mary Lou Delaney, yes.
Thank you. Oh, look at the girlfriend. I'm sorry, that's all I'm saying.
Danley, I'm sorry. Mary Lou Danley.
The girl was out of the country in the Philippines like the week before.
And got $100,000 mailed to her.
Yeah.
While he was there, apparently while he was at Mandalay Bay.
She was there within, yeah.
And this dude was a high roller gambler too, apparently. That he was you know, operating in the tens of thousands of dollars range, which is way above my pay grade.
He's actually. He wasn't a.
Clarence, you're breaking up.
I'm always breaking.
I know.
do you have, Clarence? Do you have headphones that you can plug into your phone? It improves things. It improves things significantly. If not tonight, then for next time, you'll find a lot less cutout.
Clarence, you work out every day. Go get your damn headphones.
Just got you there, bro.
Thank you.
But he's breaking up.
You're all quiet.
Wow.
Who just joined us?
Yeah, we've had Don here for a while. Don, I don't even know who you are,
everybody.
dude. What's up?
Just like normal. I just watch you guys all talking from the side too, and throw my 2 cents in every once in a
No.
Well, cool. Appreciate it.
I'd rather just let you guys go at it. You guys are way better at this than I am.
No, come on in, man. Don, who are you?
I've been on the Fermenting Opinions site for a while, a couple months now. My buddy Amanda Garcia got me hooked up with it.
Cool.
And I live in Middle Tennessee, and I'm working in a software business. I'm a veteran. I got 2 kids. I got a wife. That's me. I'm a
Welcome.
guy who focused on here. Every time I hear you guys talking, most of the time I can find nuggets of truth in everything everybody says, regardless of what side they come from, and that's what I like most about this group. So thanks for letting me join in on your phone.
Oh,
Absolutely. We're happy to have you.
We're gonna do something where we're gonna start raising hands or something. Because I feel like I'm gonna talk over everybody if you let me.
I won't let you.
If you've got a point, throw a hand up or something where you're like, "Hey, I want to talk."
Cool.
Oh.
Well, we're glad to have you, brother.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that really just I'm stuck on this whole thing, so I need somebody else to send us in another direction because I'll just keep talking about FISA.
Okay.
So when you talk about
Melissa, we haven't heard from Melissa.
Well, I kind of feel like I'm outnumbered, so I've been keeping very quiet.
I thought so.
As the only, right-leaning libertarian, pretty much. In this
Really?
I'm pretty sure James is farther right than you.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
No, because of other Smortion.
We're not going there. Let's stay focused, guys.
Okay.
That's why I consider him more left than right of Melissa. That's the only reason I say that. But keep
Okay.
Well, I was the only thing that I wanted to say. It was something that was said earlier, and I don't really remember who was the one that initiated the discussion. But I work in behavioral health care. One of my undergraduate degrees is in psychology. And I do work with mental health on a regular basis, and I have for quite a while.
Fascinating field, by the way.
It is very fascinating.
Fascinating.
And I feel like, yeah, okay, so psychological profiles for pretty much anybody is going to be different, whether you, because that's why I have a problem with like, I mean, I see the value in behavioral analysis with regard to law enforcement, whether it be through, Quantico or wherever. But I feel like, I think it's short-sighted of us to assume that if we eliminated all firearms, that because the psychological profiles for a bomber is different than someone that's a gun murderer, that there would not be, the whole mother of invention, coming into play. I mean, if we eliminate all usage of one form of violence, I still feel like people that want to be terrorists, commit terrorist acts, that are just off their meds and just have a psychotic break, or people that truly want to just be dickweeds, they're going to find a way to inflict mass casualty if given the opportunity. And I feel like it's awfully short-sighted to say that taking guns out of the hands of everyone is the answer.
Just to be clear, like that, I was not advocating for taking all the guns out of
Me either.
But hear ya, and I mean, I think my problem with when people say like, oh, well, gun regulation won't help because they'll just use bombs. I'm like, maybe some of them will, but I don't really think that 100% of them will. I mean, I don't think it's a fair.
I think via personal communications and Facebook discussions that we've had basically throughout the day and throughout the week, I think one of the things that's been pointed out very well is there's not like a one-size-fits-all solution to this thing. You can't say, oh, well, more gun control, that's going to fix it. Because there is the obvious problem. People who are deeply committed to doing these kinds of things are going to find other ways. Of course, so, and Melissa, I think pretty much everybody here, leaning left, leaning right, whoever, is probably going to agree with you that this is a complicated problem and it requires a multifaceted solution. And just gun control, I don't think is anything is going to fix the problem. I feel like a lot of people want to jump in right now. What's up?
Well, I want to continue with my thought just to kind of carry it out to how I began my thought process. I do work in behavioral health care, and one of the biggest regrets that I have from the Reagan years is the lack of I guess we kind of removed the insurance coverage and the money and research that went into mental and behavioral health care. And I feel like maybe what we need to be focusing on is not so much who's getting their hands on the guns, but trying to, I'm not saying profiling, but maybe we need to do a better job in getting people that may be in danger of having a break with their psychiatric health. Maybe we need to do a better job of being proactive and preemptive, and maybe the people that are flying under the radar that are clearly not mentally healthy, that would still pass background checks, maybe we need to do a better job with insurance coverage so people can get mental health care a lot more readily.
That was a big issue here in Baton Rouge, especially last year. They were trying to get the mental health facility reopened. We've had several shootings where people were shot and killed, and the fact of the matter is they were killed by the police, and the fact of the matter is these people were mentally unstable. They had problems. One guy, he had been around the LSU community for years. Lacey, do you remember Cowboy? Black guy, really great beard, like all down here. Used to wear a cowboy hat all the time. Used to walk up down Highland Road. Well,
No.
he was well known around the LSU campus by everybody, and for some reason he moved from around LSU campus and went down toward downtown, and the police ended up shooting him because they weren't aware of his mental state. Everybody close to campus knew him and knew his mental state, but he never really bothered anybody, even if he carried around his little knife or whatever.
What did he do?
They claimed that he attacked them. I mean, but the guy was somebody who never bothered anybody unless he was agitated, and he was around the LSU
I trust your
community for
judgment.
years.
I know you would not misconstrue something.
I think Clarence is tacitly making the point that I was going to make is that the Reagan era removals of funding and whatnot were actually removals of government, like federal government and state funding for mental health hospitals that kind of house schizophrenic and more like higher risk people. Those are not your mass shooters. Those are the people you see that are homeless now. That
Right.
you know, like those people used to be in mental hospitals because of Reagan, but we got rid of that, and now, or well, before Reagan, but now we don't pay for it on a federal level, so they don't get funding. So the people you see that are homeless, that are quote unquote crazy, are they're not your mass shooter types. Those are people who have like deep schizophrenia and things that aren't really a danger to anyone per se on a mass level or anything like that, but exactly like your guy you're calling Cowboy, that before Reagan, he would have been in a mental hospital. His family would have put him there, the state would have paid for it.
But I'm just going to tell, that's valid, James. However, because I have to deal with this frustration on a daily basis, there are literally hundreds of people that are begging for mental health care help, that are being turned away because their insurance is insufficient and they cannot pay for it themselves. And some of these people realize, I am going to do harm to myself or someone else if I don't get this help. Please help me. This is not something that I'm just pulling out of my ass. And I understand what you're saying, that these people that are homeless on the streets that are severely schizophrenic and they've been turned away from institutions. I'm saying that that's a faction. That's true. But I'm telling you, there are people that call our facilities and they want in desperately because they know they will not be here tomorrow if they don't get a bed tonight.
And that's very fair, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I was looking towards mass shooters, but I think that specifically addresses the other problem of suicides.
Here's the problem I have so far.
Just suicide.
You go ahead. You go ahead, and then I'll get to mine.
Me?
Yes, whoever. Yes, go.
Okay, so I agree with Melissa with the whole idea of, the mental health thing. I mean, I don't know. I've been warned to not make this a mental health issue by people in the medical field, so I don't want to do that. But I do think that generally that is geared towards one of the leading types of, like, the number one cause of gun deaths, which is suicide, not cause, but the type of gun death is suicide. So I get mental health kind of goes hand in hand with that. But I think that let's talk about the gun deaths that really get the public's attention, and that tends to be like the Vegas type events, the Sandy Hook, the guy that went in the theater dressed like Joker, kills everybody, Columbine, all these different, mass shootings. Orlando, there's zillions, not really, but a lot. That's what gets the attention of the public. And I just think that, also the people that are there are like just there. Like, I live in New Orleans, I worry every Mardi Gras, or I have worried for the past 5 years every Mardi Gras. Like, someone, like, since 9/11, I probably should have started worrying, but like that someone could just run into the crowd and, blow us all up if they wanted to. I mean, this is an easy place to kill people if they wanted to. And, you just feel bad for people that are out living life and they just get blown up like that or shot up like that. And so the big weapons, I feel like unless there's some legitimate, reasonable reason that people should have these weapons, I feel like they shouldn't.
I come from a standpoint of I can't even get there yet because I still have unresolved factors in this whole Vegas shooting. One of those being multiple people have said there was a woman running around the front row telling people you're going to die tonight. We haven't resolved that yet. So I'm not willing to go to, this is just a crazy guy, and
on Bourbon Street, there's someone like that every night. And they're religious. And I'm just saying, Vegas is like Bourbon Street.
And I'm not discounting anything yet. I'm one of those people that I need to hear. Here's what we know happened.
Yeah, I think.
And then I can go into he was just a wacko who, for no reason whatsoever, other than he was mentally unstable, decided to start shooting people. I want to hear a resolution to. All right, here's what this girl did. yes, it's not crazy that he got all these weapons. People are freaking out like, how did nobody see that he got all these weapons? Well, you take weapons apart and you put them in suitcases and you roll in suitcases. I want to hear, all right, here's how this happened. Here's what this chick did. Here's how this played out. Then we can decide. All right, you know what?
So you think it's like it's part of the location. Like perhaps the whatever's happening, it's environmental. If we try to improve the environment, we can prevent things like this from happening.
If the situation leads us to, if the circumstances lead us to, we don't have a fucking clue how this happened, other than this is just some crazy dude. He's not tied to some white supremacist. He's not tied to some leftist. He's not tied to Antifa. He's not tied to what? Then yes, I just want to hear something first.
I think
not discounting mental health. I have eight friends and family who have committed suicide. I get mental health. And clearly this guy was.
But it's not just suicide. It's people that want help because they'll go and they'll harm others too. I think that Siobhan was about to say something about that earlier. It's not just about suicide and mental health. There is a connection between some of these people that, especially children that go and kill their fellow students because they've been bullied.
Right. I want to hear what happened first.
I think another important thing to recognize here is the recency of what's happened, and figuring out fact from fiction, because it's just been a couple of days. One of the things that I always like to point out, and just to aside briefly, when 9/11 happened, my folks were in D.C. There was reports in the news that there were gas chemical attacks in the subway system on 9/11 in D.C. A lot of people don't know that. But that was a story that was circulating at the time. There was a lot of panic, a lot of fear. Turned out that was a total fabrication based on probably a rumor. There's lots of stories going around right now, and there's lots of fake news going around right now. A lot of people disseminating false information deliberately right now, and a lot of that hasn't been filtered out. One thing I think we could probably all agree on here is if you do something like what this guy did, you're not a mentally healthy person. That's not something we have to be confused on at all.
Correct.
And that's where we need to operate from. This guy was sick. Why was he sick? But how did it go undetected? Basically, this dude's whole life because he flew under the radar. These are things we do know. James, what are you saying?
I'm sorry. That's what I wanted to get at, especially is that there was no indication this man was mentally ill. Like there was nothing.
Right, so how would you prevent something? Yeah, that's what I've been hearing.
Thank you. And
that's a big question, absolutely.
Like I said, the only people who said they saw anything strange was the sisters of the girlfriend with his behavior. That's the only people that I've heard so far that
they're reported
said anything about that. Like that.
I mean, didn't they just say he was an asshole? I mean, I didn't really see much else aside from just general dickish.
Well, the report I said that they made them feel uncomfortable, or he was kind of strange. He made them feel uncomfortable, something like that.
Well, I mean
that could be anything.
Actually, a red flag, lacking empathy, red flag.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
I'm just saying, like, there are a lot of red flags that people probably aren't familiar with, and there's nothing wrong with maybe.
Is that quantifiable, and you can actually deny somebody a gun permit because they've got no empathy or something along those lines?
I'm not saying that you should deny somebody a gun permit because he's an asshole.
Then I definitely shouldn't have a gun permit.
Yeah, me neither.
So without being able to quantify that, without being able to assess that, without being able to use it as a measuring stick for who gets, who's allowed to have guns, who's not allowed to have guns, how can we try to use this? I mean, you can't use it. You can't. I just have a difficult time understanding how we would ever prevent something like this. Is it something that we should try to prevent it, but
sometimes crazy is going to do crazy.
Well, and I think that you're jumping straight to the gun regulation side of it. And like David mentioned before, I mean, I think that we are all, and I don't know if you saw this conversation already on the page, but we were talking more about a multifaceted kind of comprehensive approach and identifying red flags and having a way to, report people like this,
God damn it.
or get them mental health or whatever. Or at least get, and realistically, the people who know you best probably know whether or not you're a fucking psychopath. That's just true.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just putting a little bit, giving people a little bit more of an opportunity or more tools for kind of reporting people that they know who are not stable or healthy or whatever, and then kind of having a secondary investigation kind of happen or whatever, even if it's just getting them mental health help, then I mean that's better than nothing. But I don't know that we can necessarily say 3 points if you're an asshole, 4 points if you kill kittens.
Yeah.
If you get 10 points, you can't get a permit.
Yeah.
I
think that's where we're going with it. I think it's more of the getting the right people involved.
What about if you gave away a kitten and your 2 daughters were distraught and still write about it in school when they have to write a story about it? James may have seen that story.
I know that story. It's a hard bad news, bro. I don't think your daughter should own firearms.
Oh boy.
Oh my God.
Sounds like it could go the Sandy Hook route, over some years.
We did a 1-month trial run with a kitten and my oldest daughter when she was in kindergarten. They asked them to write a sad story. And people were writing things like, there was a ghost or something like that. And my daughter wrote, one day, my dad bought us a kitten. We loved that kitten. He was so, blah, blah, blah. The next day, my dad gave it away. What? Bad. The next day?
More like 30 days later and you couldn't change it.
Wait, did you give it away? Why would you give them a kitten and take it away?
Because after a month, the thing still nibbled on my ear like it was nursing when I was trying to sleep. It hung on the back of the couch. It hung in the Christmas tree. It was a piece of shit. I hung it like a cat. I never liked it. But I gave it a solid month.
Wait.
But according to her, it was a day.
Oh, wait.
Asshole, you know.
I'm concerned that you're going to shoot up the local Burger King like that. Calm down. But seriously, did the daughters, did they clean up after the cat? Did they change litter box stuff or do anything that involved pet responsibility?
Of course not.
Okay, well then that's not.
We're getting off track here.
Yeah, thank you, Siobhan. Yeah.
People tired 9:30, so
Anthony got breitbarted by his daughters.
My oldest daughter could be a shooter one day.
I really hope not. I think.
Kidding.
I know. But, to revisit what Don was saying earlier, I think this is. I think one of the things that's more disturbing about what's happened here is that there's usually in the aftermath of something like this, there's signs. You can look at someone's Facebook profile, or you can talk to the neighbors and the friends and the family members about someone, and they have a history of mental illness. They have a history of being involved in extremist activities. With this guy, there's nothing. It's out of left field. And I think that's what's more terrifying almost than anything else that happened here. That there were really, by all the normal checks and balances, which we say that this person failed because this was a clear sign that he was doing this or he was getting into that and nobody did anything. There's always a finger to point. Right now, at least, it doesn't seem like there's a finger to point. It's just batshit insane, and there was no way to be ready for it. And that brings the question, well, how else could we have stopped this thing? Because what happened is unacceptable. And that's something we can all agree on. It's fucking unacceptable what happened. But how do you realistically prepare for it? How you realistically do anything to curtail what happened on Sunday?
You don't. I mean, outside of magically erasing all of the guns in America, there's really no way as a system prepare for something like this? Like,
That's what
I
I
have a
feel.
question. Wait, I have a question. So I was told that there's a problem right now with what's called like, it's like the loophole, which is like where they sell guns at gun shows, private party to private party. Speaking of a simple solution, trying to like just take it a step at a time and start to try to little step it. Maybe one thing is to close the loophole, which would prevent. It would make there be background checks for private gun sales. And really the only people getting pissed off about this are people that buy guns from private gun sales. And I know that sucks for them, but maybe there's some way we can make them all register and be super, super, super regulated. I don't know, but there's got it so that they can, you know, not totally have their enjoyment at gun shows taken away, but there's got to be something.
Well, now they're saying that he had 50 pounds of explosives in his car, too.
But wait, that's... I mean,
okay.
So what about making it harder to buy guns at private gun sales?
Do you have any proof this man or any mass shooter ever that we have? I mean, any mass shooter, do you have any proof that any of them bought a gun at a gun sale?
That was my question.
Well,
At a gun show? I mean, I buy a lot of my firearms at gun shows because
no, I have no idea. I don't know enough about it. I mean, that's one I'm willing to listen to that potential issue factually, but I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like I was accusing you of attacking you or anything. I'm just wondering, like, do we have any proof that this guy purchased a firearm?
No, I don't know. I've not read that. But I was actually talking to someone who's pro-guns, and they said, look, if we're going to try, that's actually, he suggested to me that that's a reasonable solution that people are usually okay with, but it's been knocked down by the NRA. And I don't know if that's true or not, but as someone who, as a gun supporter, I mean, and I'm not anti all guns. I'm just anti, you know, guns that no one except maybe some like 0.001% of the population uses because they just truly enjoy shooting that type of gun at a range.
Yeah,
you know, it makes them happy to do that. They can't even shoot elk or something with it because it would explode the freaking animal. You know what I'm saying?
What year did the University of Texas shooter happen? 67,
Like,
68.
No, it was like in the 80s. It was like
No,
80s.
no.
It was older than that.
Yeah.
Yes, it was in the 60s, late 60s.
But he had a brain tumor.
Okay. Were the gun laws less strict?
It was
back then?
1966, Anthony,
Okay.
1966.
Oh, you beat me to it.
Were
Good
far
job.
less strict back then, correct? What has changed? It's not gun laws. Gun laws have gotten stricter.
They have.
And shootings have gotten worse.
They have.
I can't sit here and tell you, oh, it's gun laws.
I would also point out that Columbine happened in the middle of the Clinton assault rifle ban.
Correct.
And it was carried out with assault rifles.
Something else has happened. It is not gun laws. Something else has happened. I don't know the answer. I'm not claiming to
Are
know
we
the
really
answer.
going to compare like what the status of the gun market was in the 60s? I mean, that guy.
Yeah.
Everybody had a gun in the 60s.
Yeah, but that's like saying.
Hey! Like the guy ET used a rifle. Like
He did. Bolt action.
so,
Yes.
right? So bolt action rifle, okay? Like the assault or like the mass shootings that are being carried out right now are not. Like nobody is carrying around like a fucking rifle that you have to reload every like second or third shot. Like it's just like not, you know, they're carrying around high capacity magazines. And, like, you know, so if you're saying like what's changed, like well that seems like an obvious one to me.
I don't think it's the gun laws. I think it's people.
No, I think it's the gun market. It's not the laws necessarily. It's the fact that we have a lot more guns and they're a lot more efficient at killing a lot of people really quickly.
I would say technology is a factor here.
I mean, it's just, yeah. Sorry, go David.
I was just going to say, just briefly, I've only shot an AR once in my life, and the thing had a scope on it, and like, I had the experience of thinking, this is so easy. You could teach a child to do this. This is, I'm right dead. I'm center mass every time, over and over and over again. You could train a monkey to use this thing. Like,
Thank God somebody started that rifle in for you before they handed it to you.
That's neither here nor there. I'm just saying, you made it phenomenally easy.
I don't know what distance you're shooting at or anything else, but like somebody else put the work into turning that into an accurate fire. You didn't just pick it up and put the scope on it yourself.
I'm just saying you don't have to be a master marksman to use one of these things effectively at all. So the learning curve has been reduced from what it used to be. That was the point I was trying to make.
Once you scope it in, you're fine.
Yeah, that's true. Well, for the distance or whatever the distance is. But and I completely agree with you. And that's kind of my initial point when I was talking about it earlier about how much damage could somebody who was trained, like the UT marksman, who knew what the hell he was doing. If you're sitting in an elevated position like that at Mandalay Bay, even with a bolt action rifle, you could have killed a lot more people
In 11 minutes? Absolutely.
Hell yes. I mean,
I'm sorry, did you just say that you could have killed more than 50-something people in 11 minutes with a bolt action?
Absolutely.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
11 minutes is a long time.
At 350 yards or whatever it was, where there's not even a hope or a prayer for law enforcement to be able to shoot back.
You said 1,100 previously.
1,100 feet. 1,100 feet.
Okay,
is,
okay.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe y'all are just way
close to 400 yards. That's a long distance, and that's not easy.
100 rounds in 11 minutes. I mean, you must be like a machine.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm just saying, if you know what you're doing, you can be a lot more efficient.
Let's not get into the pedant. Okay, let's not do that. Okay.
And I'm saying the difference between those mass shooters were that with this high accessibility of firearms with God knows how fast the fire rate and things like this, it's totally different than from some guy in 1966 with a bolt action who's a trained Marine who can shoot.
Right. Again, what I was saying, the difference is that it's a lot easier to do this kind of damage than it used to be technologically. That's the only point I was trying to make.
Now, yeah, I'm jumping. I was trying to jump in there with you. I guess I sound the wrong direction. That's what I was trying to say. Is that's the difference.
The instant notoriety you get with the fact that every single camera is on 24/7 news cycles. That's the reason why we're seeing more and more of these. People are disaffected, and they want to be able to lash out at the world. They want to be able to be, even though they feel like they're not being heard in the world, this is their chance to be
heard
in the world.
I'll lean to that. I'll lean to that.
Yeah.
Copycat.
Copycat. It's just easier to be known for lashing out now.
Copycat.
You're going to get your 15 minutes of fame for sure now by killing as many people as possible. That's what's more motivational than gun laws being more restrictive or less restrictive, or more people having guns or less people having guns. It's just nature, human nature of this. It's easier to lash out now than it was back then.
Absolutely.
On a different note that I find semi-interesting, that I don't want to go too far in the weeds of conspiracy theory, but we have no background on this guy. There's nothing that's really pointing us towards mass shooters or something like this. The only thing we do know about him is that he's a high-stakes gambler. He gambles a lot. And we do kind of have a recent history of mob involvement in things.
I know where you're going.
Anybody from New Orleans can tell you about the JFK trials and the fact that New Orleans as a city prosecuted multiple people suspected of being involved in JFK assassinations. They were mob, all this stuff.
You're going there.
Yeah, I'm going there. But
are you trying to suggest that someone put him up to doing this because of like gambling debt or something?
I don't even necessarily put him up to it, but really just threw him in the middle of it. And I'm just, and that's why I said I don't want to go too far into the weeds with it, but it does seem a little odd that we haven't had too many mass shooters in American history that don't have any signs. I mean,
dude, that's just what the papers are reporting now. We don't know yet.
But until we know what happened, it's worth entertaining.
And there's like drugs, drugs is more likely to me than something like because he was doing it for money. Really? What person that has done that has gotten out alive?
But then he killed himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a planned attack. That's an important thing to remember. Yeah. This dude rolled in. He shipped his girlfriend overseas for the weekend or whatever.
Checked himself into a hotel.
Sent her $100,000. Came to a hotel with over a dozen firearms. You know, prepared this whole thing for whatever reason. He knew he was going to do it before he got there.
And then went the fuck off.
It's not like he got himself into trouble in Vegas, and this ended up happening. You know.
I get all of that. I'm saying that something about it still seems a little bit strange. I really can't point to a mass shooter like this as being something else.
Was anything said about his political affiliation?
Nope.
Not a thing right yet.
A lot of speculation. Much speculation, and that's it.
Yep, regular ass dude from all accounts.
I've heard everything from he was Antifa to leftist,
ISIS,
Trump hater, ISIS. Yeah.
Somebody said some dumb, and I didn't really follow up on the story because it didn't seem all that interesting. But somebody suggested that he was shooting those people because they like country music, and that made him more likely to be like Trump supporters or something. Like, did anyone else hear that? I think that's the most.
That's a theory. Everybody's throwing that.
Well, it's not a ridiculous thing to say.
That's so messed up if anyone ever said that. That's so messed up.
I'm not even trying to.
I know liberals that love country music. I personally can't stand the shit.
I don't think anything
there.
that was like a motivation, but there was something like people got upset about. I think it was a CNN anchor who said, just like as a random aside, said like, something about country music supporters tend to be Trump supporters or whatever. I don't even know. I think that's where that's coming from.
That's people looking for answers way before the answers come out.
That's people looking for something to yell at each other about.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, and I think that anytime, as we've been talking about this and we're doing it now, it's like trying to figure out kind of like what the motivations were and, what are the characteristics of this group that made them a target or whatever. And so I think that was probably what was going on. But either way, like obviously inappropriate for someone to say on national television.
But everybody's a goddamn profiler these days.
Well, hang on.
Well, they got to fill up their 24 hours,
An angry white guy with an assault rifle. Of course it was.
On the CBS end, that was an executive VP who was also part of their general counsel, who made a Facebook comment that said, I have no sympathies for these people because they're all a bunch of Trump supporters who listen to country music or something. And she was summarily fired by CBS.
Yes.
But
everybody's fucking profiler.
Yeah,
rightly so, too.
I don't really know what to say about this CBS thing because that's kind of unconscionable and also incredibly
grossly insensitive.
I mean, after like a mass shooting, like that's like somebody after Atlanta being like, whatever, I don't feel bad. They're all gonna burn in hell anyway.
It smells like
how did you get to your position? Because you had to say something stupid before then. So how did you get to that position in the first place?
But
you would be shocked. I mean, I feel like it's very surprising when you're like, "Wow, how'd you get here?" And it's like, "You're a moron."
Yeah, right.
Happens a lot.
I wanted to be clear on what I was saying real quick is that I'm not trying to push a conspiracy theory or something. I'm just saying that it does seem odd.
We don't know anything yet.
And that's really a big thing about us. We really don't. Right.
And we need to put a pin in the speculation, probably.
This is the reason that I want that terrorist declaration, so I can get my FISA shit and go back and find out what's going on. Because
and maybe, hopefully so.
This isn't Adam Lanza. This isn't what is his name, James Holmes or whatever. This isn't some weirdo psycho who dyes his hair and thinks he's a Joker and goes and shoots up a movie theater, or some strange fucking kid who never stops playing Call of Duty and steals mommy's guns and really hates his parents and goes and shoots up a bunch of kindergartners. This is odd. I mean, this guy is really planned out, fit the bill.
James, I don't quite understand what you mean by bringing in the FISA part. Is it the FISA part about, isn't it foreign intelligence surveillance?
It is, but that's
domestically?
NSA is not allowed to access domestic stuff. We're allowed to record it. NSA records everything and keeps it all compiled, and they're not allowed to touch it, supposedly. I mean, that's bullshit. I know they go through it. But they're not allowed to touch it without a FISA warrant.
Okay.
NSA is not allowed to spy on Americans without a FISA warrant. Even then, they have to be masked. And then they have reasons to unmask Americans that are involved. I mean, it's a very complicated.
All right, James, let's take a step back here. So, yes, it is foreign intelligence, but FISA specifically does allow you to spy on American citizens as long as you have, reasonable. Let's see, the standard is a little bit higher, like actually a lot higher than regular warrant. But if that you have reasonable suspicion or like probable cause that this person is an agent of a foreign government, And so they are technically, theoretically, supposed to be pretty hard to get. I mean, if you believe Edward Snowden's side of it, then they're basically getting rubber stamped. And if you look at the stats, 99.9% of FISA warrant applications get granted. There are a lot of reasons that could be true. One of them is the court could be a big rubber stamp. Another one could be the DOJ is so wicked good at FISA warrant applications, they all get granted.
But my issue is you have an American citizen, we don't have any outside ties to some kind of foreign organization.
The more The more important question is there any reason this guy would have been recorded for anything, anywhere, ever? A FISA warrant would be completely irrelevant if there's no record of him saying anything to anyone who's been recorded.
There's a record of every phone conversation, email, or text message you've sent since like 2012.
Your carrier does keep that information on file. That was actually a big change after the Snowden leaks.
Yes.
The NSA doesn't store information anymore.
Oh.
Because I was saying, because the content of like a call or what have you would not necessarily be there, but the fact that a call was made or text was made from number A to number B, yeah. I'm just questioning how useful this information would be in this case.
I think it's really more about being able to get into all the social media and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know how useful any of this. I mean, we don't have content of phone calls. You don't. I mean, your carrier doesn't store them.
Not yet. No, not anymore.
I mean, they do keep a register of phone calls you make and receive, obviously, and then I think to some extent they keep content of text messages. Text messages, not like iMessages and stuff. Those aren't stored on your carrier's servers.
Would you guys be satisfied to know that that American citizens are being listened to, all of our stuff is being captured and can be used to stuff at any time? And you guys be happy to know that this guy was recorded for some reason?
No. This is why I'm a big fan of Edward Snowden. That does not make me happy. But I will take Siobhan's word for it because I don't know anything about the updates on PRISM or the system before that or after the Snowden leaks. But I will tell you that what Snowden was protesting is that we had actually started storing every conversation had by Americans, period, on any computer device.
It wasn't quite that, but I mean, effectively, yes, but it had to be like you were within 2 degrees of separation of someone they were monitoring, which basically meant like 4 million.
A large portion of us, which the NSA should not have a right to spy on. No one has a right to spy on. We have warrant privileges. We are American citizens. We have fucking rights. That shit should not be accessed. And I don't know what
I've never bought into that, though.
I will tell you that I can tell you the difference between which carriers keep what, having been a prosecutor and dealt with it. I can tell you that Sprint and Verizon keep all of the contents of your text messages for 3 years, and they store that.
If it's in the air, they got it. Yeah, that's the way I look at it. If it's in the air, if it's digital, they got it.
And that doesn't change for iMessage or anything else.
Yeah, because iMessages are actually not run through your carrier. That's over the internet. It's encrypted.
They are. I was going to say they still have. They still store Sprint and Verizon still store the encrypted stuff, but they can't decrypt it either legally or without Apple's blessing and help. They still have the encrypted information. You could still illegally decrypt it, or with a warrant, you may be able to bypass it anyway. But that's all. That's not here nor there. What I'm saying is, some carriers keep it, some carriers don't. We don't record phone conversations anymore. That I understand. I really don't know if that's true or not.
Okay.
That's why air quote. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thanks to Apple, I had to unplug my earphones and plug in my charger.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's
So,
funny.
but this is why I hang out with you guys. An Alabama redneck who majored in accounting and works in construction. I love listening and reading your guys' opinions, legal opinions on these things. This fascinates me.
We have a fantastic pool of talent here. Really, we do.
I want
somebody enjoys reading what we comes out of our brains.
I'm just glad you guys aren't charging $250 an hour to let us know the legal opinions
Way more than that.
Do not give them any ideas, please.
We chose way more than that, homie.
You're gonna have to get a subscription for Fermenting Opinions after this.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you don't want to do my billable rate.
Far more fascinating than the whiskey page.
Why, thank you so much for that endorsement. I appreciate that.
But wait. Hang on. I wanted to. I mean, I appreciate all the kissing of the ass. That's awesome, man. I love it. But
It wasn't your ass, it was our ass. Thank you very much.
Whoa.
I said kissing of the ass. I didn't know if it was. Anyway, Clarence and Don both had huge points they wanted to make. I've been trying to get in. I want to hear what they said. I'm sorry.
No, I just was trying to understand whether or not the comments you were making about bringing FISA in there was going to have an impact on this investigation. Because like everybody has been mentioned already, it's too soon right now. We don't know enough about it to really make good policy decisions off of anything without the intelligence yet. And I would think law enforcement can get their hands on Facebook and a lot of they can do search warrants and. They can't do that.
No,
they can do that when this guy's
Facebook
committed
fights that shit tooth and nail, and so does Apple.
Yeah.
Don't do anything else.
Why when somebody has committed a crime, you can't get warrants into that kind of stuff?
You can
I
try.
mean, I thought you can try. Okay, I thought that would be something you could easily get in on. Especially because it's when you're having more than one-way conversations. These are public conversations that everybody can see already. Like I can go look back at everything that we have all talked about on Fermenting Opinions.
But your
I'll
Facebook.
tell you that James McVeigh guy, he's got a lot of opinions on this.
Yeah, but hang on.
I thought about that. None of us can run for a political office. We'd be smashed.
Well, they probably get.
I mean, things could leave.
You'd be surprised.
Anything, so.
But I'm talking about messages and whatnot on Facebook, like actual like private messages between people and whatnot. No. Facebook has a user base that is massive, and they have to protect privacy, and they do that through the roof. I mean,
Like a public
they were reluctant to give information on Russian agents, trying to hack into our elections and do different things. They were reluctant to do that, and they're still kind of fighting. Like they're supposedly cooperating, but. I mean, they might be cooperating with Mueller, but they're really not cooperating with the Senate and the House.
They handed over a lot of that information to the Intelligence Committee.
And I think, much more than they normally do, though.
But they're fighting it for good reason, because it's obviously once you open the door to that kind of thing, then what's to stop the government from asking them? And the government has done this, like ask them for a bunch of stuff that the government doesn't do. And they open the door to that stuff, like where you tell the government to go fuck itself.
Yeah, and that always begs the question of when do you say no?
Yeah, and that's why Apple, like with the San Bernardino, spree killing, like that guy had an Apple phone, and Apple refused to crack it for the FBI. I mean, the FBI sued Apple to get a federal judge to compel Apple to actually build a backdoor into their security software so that they could access his phone, and they fucking lost.
Siobhan, is there a difference between a telephone, which is got a person-to-person phone call, versus a social media post on your wall that the whole world can see?
Oh, yes.
Expectation of privacy.
I mean, if we're talking about messages between two people on Facebook, then that's a different story. But yeah, I mean, your privacy settings. I mean, arguably, anything you post on your Facebook page that's shared with anybody, you don't really have a reasonable expectation of privacy on.
Right. And so that's why I would think that within some amount of time, we're going to find out more about the motivations of this killer in Las Vegas. At least I hope so, because right now all of us are shrugging and speculating and guessing, and I'm hoping that nobody's making policy decisions off of anything that they have yet, because you can't make decisions off of what you know so far.
Procedurally, it's going to take time. It will take time to pull those records.
Yeah. I was going to say a fun fact, speaking of San Bernardino, the guy who actually broke Apple's encryption and created the backdoor and did it was a Tennessee Bureau Investigation officer that was a friend of mine that I actually know. He now lives in Quantico and works for FBI immediately. And he can
wait.
Yes.
He busted Apple's backdoor and got the San Bernardino stuff without their permission.
Are you sure he didn't just crack the passwords?
Oh yeah, no, I think you might be right. Actually, I think he came up with a way to fish the password and break it instead of the other way around. But the thing was, the FBI or nobody else could figure out how to break the password. But either way,
well, that's because they refuse to hire people who smoke weed and live in their mom's basements and have green hair. That's the truth. Like, they have shit fucking hackers because they fucking drug test all their hackers. Also, a lot of hackers are like very anti-government. I can't imagine why.
Yeah, right. Like, you know, that libertarian thing where you're talking about Jesus. I can't believe people trust the federal government to do shit right. But
yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to say that because there's a really big difference between like the Linux or the Apple security.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think what he did was he actually cracked the password or whatever. But he's now moved on to work for them, and I'm sure he will be involved in cracking this guy's phone and whatever the hell. Granted, this guy probably threw his phone out of that window.
If he was smart.
Well, he also set up cameras to monitor what's going on down the hall and everything else. I mean, it sounds like he was pretty intelligent about what he was doing.
I just kind of want to get back to the point a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to move this thing along. You know, we've talked a good
deal. Get out, guys.
Okay, Clarence, thank you for coming out, man.
Yeah, I mean, Don, like, I mean, to some extent, yeah, I think this guy's motivations will be helpful in formulating policy decisions moving forward, but I don't think it's necessary. I mean, especially, like, it's not like we're making the law based on this one particular incident.
Right, and nor should we.
We've got, yeah, exactly, and we've got like 1,600 spree killings since, in the past like 6 years to draw from. Which is obviously a statistically significant amount of spree killings.
Melissa, what's up?
I just have a question, and it's a big hypothetical, and I hope it doesn't, you know, piss anybody off. But what if, regardless of what this guy's motivation was, or regardless of his mental health status, regardless of anything, let's say, what if we get to some type of utopian existence in America where we've got the left satisfied with gun regulations and the right satisfied with gun no regulation. I mean, let's just say that we don't ever find out a way to prevent this. What if, just saying, what if we do everything quote unquote correctly and we still can't prevent it? What happens then? What if there is no answer? What if we're sitting here beating our heads on this brick wall and it's for nothing?
Well, we don't know unless we try.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a fair statement, but at the same time, like, what are you saying we should do? Like, just ignore the problem and pretend?
Not at all. I'm just saying. I'm not saying don't do anything at all. I'm saying, what if we keep beating this horse? Because I feel like we have this conversation. I'm not saying this group, but I'm saying as a country.
Yeah.
We have this conversation repeatedly, and yet nothing comes of it. No one can agree on what needs to be done. And at the end of the day, in my mind, in my thinking, there really isn't going to be a solution that's going to prevent this from happening, because I do truly believe that there are people that are going to become mentally unstable, or that are going to become so derailed in their thought process and their thinking that there's always going to be someone that's going to want to, need to, or have to cause chaos, terrorism, or destruction of life or property. I just don't know that there's any way that we can prevent this from happening again. And maybe I'm being the fly in the ointment. I just don't know that there's a way to stop it. Honestly.
I think you raised several. Let's kind of unpack that. Several good points there. First, like, is there, what are the odds that we can prevent this from happening 100%? I mean, I think you're right. We're probably never going to be able to completely eradicate it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, and it doesn't.
I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I'm just saying it's
And it doesn't mean that we aren't going to be at least moderately effective at it. I mean, if we stop, 5 out of 10 spree killings, like, is that success? I mean, I would say it would be. We've got to do something, because at this point it's happening with such regularity that it's really pretty shocking.
Well, we got to
do something.
also take into account the fact that we aren't just talking about spree killings. We're talking about, suicides due to gun deaths. We're talking about toddlers accidentally shooting their parents and their playmates. We're talking about gang violence. We're talking about women who are shot by their partners at a football watch party, like stuff like that. So it's not just spree killings. This is
gun deaths. Yeah. No.
Is it a societal issue or a gun issue?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's got to be reasonable means that
Is it a societal issue or a gun issue?
I think it's
That's a
both.
good question.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right, nothing has been done because I think we get bogged down in the partisan horseshit. And I think we need to start with, first off, did you know that the CDC is not allowed to investigate gun violence?
I did.
Because of the NRA.
Crazy? The NRA has effectively blocked the CDC from ever doing a comprehensive study. From a public health perspective, when gun violence is one of the largest threats to public health in the country.
I would say the NRA, hand in hand with our modern GOP, has done that.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
But yeah, they basically tell people how to vote.
If you had lived through both, if you were old enough to have lived through both, would you have found the 1968 University of Texas shooting more shocking than the Las Vegas shooting? And I dare say I would have found the UT shooting more shocking based on the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, at this point, do we really have any right to be shocked whenever we see a spree killing?
So what has changed from then to now?
Man, I really don't want to do the whole parse everything out thing. But there's a huge difference between spree shootings and spree killings, like mass shooting, mass killing. Mass shooting means that 3 or more people were injured. Mass shooting means 7 people were killed. The mass killing numbers aren't nearly as bad as the mass shooting numbers. They're all terrible, and I don't want to do that. But the numbers we're thinking of when we say mass shooting or something like that, where it's almost daily, involves some shootout, no matter how many actors or whatever.
So what has changed? Have guns changed? Have gun laws changed?
I would say to an extent guns have changed, and also
The
expectations.
population has changed. The population, there's more people now. There's more of a gun culture
And
now.
we've seen this so many times now. It is less shocking now. That's 50. We talk about Vegas. We're calling it the most devastating, mass killing, mass shooting in history, right? That's the only reason why it's significant. If only 25 people were killed, this would be a much smaller story than what it is. It's only because it set a record that we're experiencing this level of shock and awe as a nation, because it's set a new bar. That's the only reason. I think that's one of the biggest things and the biggest problems is that it's become commonplace at this point. We've become used to this. It's only the worst one, and that's only why we're still talking about it.
Okay. That's a very point. I mean,
and to answer your question as far as what's changed, I mean, it would be impossible to put our finger on one particular thing that is causing all of this. I think that it's probably a combination of a lot of factors. I'm sure that a lot of them are societal based. I'm sure that a lot of it has to do with lack of funding for mental health care. A lot of it has to do with the fact that guns are more readily available. They're a lot more efficient at killing a lot of people. Things like that. I mean, ammunition is more plentiful, cheaper. So I think that the first step is to identify what the causes are of gun violence generally, and that's where things like the CDC come into play. I do this for a living. So pinpointing all the stuff that's causing these things, and then addressing how we can fix those root causes. Because, it is useless at this particular point in time to talk about regulations and what would and wouldn't work, because we don't know. Because we have been completely prevented from figuring out what the causes are, and that's fucked up.
I don't know.
We've been silenced.
But I agree that guns have changed, because I feel like, and I wasn't alive back then, but I feel like just from talking to my relatives and friends, not everybody, obviously, but air quote, everybody, back then had at least a gun in the house. You know, maybe it was a 22 long rifle, maybe it was a 410 shotgun, maybe it was whatever. But that was just kind of a thing. Everybody had a gun, and once in a while they go out and shoot some rabbits or something. No big deal. Just guns weren't that big of a deal. You just had one. And then suddenly this dude goes up in a bell tower shooting everybody. And that was crazy. And now all of a sudden, it's not that crazy anymore. And it sucks. And I don't know that guns have changed. I feel like people have changed. And I don't know what has, I don't know.
I've got a question. I do have a question because Siobhan keeps mentioning the CDC, and my thought is I don't get why the CDC would have such a vested interest. I think NIMH, NIM would be more apt to be someone that would be, or an entity that would be more apropos. But did the CDC and NIM actually coordinate together to do studies? I mean, it's kind of like how the CIA and the FBI, they both get their own information, but neither one of them wants to share with each other. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
What was your suggestion for the agency that should handle
NIM? NIM. National Institute of Mental Health.
Oh, I mean,
so just generally speaking, gun violence studies have been shut down for like the last 20 years. So it doesn't matter what agency, none of them have been allowed to do it.
Yeah, no, and CDC was the most likely candidate, but Siobhan's absolutely right. I mean, the NRA has basically said, if you don't vote the way we want you to vote, we'll fuck you. You'll know it.
Well,
that's the way it's worked. I mean,
I'm just saying that there are entities that are more geared specifically for that type of research and study than you know than an Ebola crisis for you know.
Well, I mean, that's not all that the CDC does. Like, that's a very small part of what they do.
I get that, but what I'm saying is that they're. I'm just trying to correlate better.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but they actually had like gun violence research started, and it was shut down.
All right, guys, I gotta jump off.
Yeah,
bye, Lacey.
Bye, Lacey.
Bye, Monty. Bye, Monty.
Bye.
Bye, Miss Lisa. He says bye, everybody. Good night, guys.
Yeah,
I see you.
I need to go too pretty soon, unless y'all want to wrap.
I think it's probably a good time to close it out.
The only thing I was going to say is that the firearms haven't changed. Since the early 70s, we've had Mini 14 Rugers, basically the same thing as an AR-15, put in a wooden stock. And I mean, they accept high-capacity magazines. They do the same thing. They do the same shit. They're the same gun. They really haven't changed. It's not that firearms have changed. I think it really has a lot to do with the NRA and the way things have been lobbied, and just the general push of this propaganda scare of they're going to take your guns away, buy more. And it's kind of pushed this conversation, and it's pushed this drive for us to buy more and more firearms and do different things.
Which you know is intentional.
I agree entirely, and that's the thing that bothers me is that when I talked earlier on the page about accessibility of firearms, it's not about how easily you can buy one or something like that. It's the general accessibility. You can find a friend, coworker, family member. Somebody's got AR-15s. Somebody's got handguns. You can go find them in their home. I mean, they're everywhere. Firearms are everywhere in this country. We don't treat them with the respect we should have anymore. They're everywhere. They're prevalent, and that is a huge problem. I mean,
I think our problem is a gun culture. I think our problem is a fuck you culture.
I don't know, man. Like, have you ever seen a bunch of college dudes hand around a fucking loaded handgun while they're drunk in some of
Yes.
I have. I have seen that so many times. I've
watched a bunch of crunchy liberals do that shit. You know, they have no idea.
I've actually been around when at least 2 people have accidentally shot their friends because they're fucking drunk and they're playing the handgun.
Yes.
Like, that's fucked up. Like,
James is playing with a fucking.
No, they're not. They're like
James.
frat boys.
But this is this is a far cry from what we're talking about with regards to mass shootings. We have irresponsible stupidity, which can take so many forms, which includes drunk college students. But we're talking about mass shootings. We're talking about the epidemic of gun homicides in this country, and the fact that we do piddle shit. And I think you get to a good point with regards to the NRA and the effect that it has, because the NRA is really all about money.
Exactly,
because they're board of whatever. They're all captains of the gun industry. These are all people who stand to make financial gain by making sure more people have more guns. And I'm not an anti-gun person. If anybody who really knows me knows that I have my concealed carry, that I own firearms. I'm not an anti-Second Amendment. I'm not trying to take anyone's guns away. And the other point I was going to make is that the Obama administration was probably one of the best things that ever happened to gun sales in the United States, because they sold the fear. Obama's going to come take your guns for 8 fucking years. Not a damn bit of gun legislation passed that I know of, and gun sales went up. After this shooting, the stock price of the company that owns Smith & Wesson and one other, I think Ruger, they both took a jump. It was good business, baby. Like,
you're going to see
that's another big part of the problem, is the money involved in this, and really just the lack of empathy of the people who were profiting.
It's not really a lack of empathy there. It's more of a fear-driven market reaction of.
I said of the people who are profiting.
That's not dumb, like in case something goes wrong where gun restrictions come into play quickly, you can make quick moves. It's a short sale type of thing, but that's a whole other deal. And
I think David is talking about how the gun companies don't give a fuck about the fact that they're profiting off of
That's what I was saying, yes.
Well, sure, you can't blame them in the same way you can't blame some mortgage company or somebody else for profiting off of some horrible crisis. I
think we did. Pretty sure we did.
We only blamed them after the fact. They were profiting beforehand. But what I'm saying is, when it comes to gun sales, gun sales are going to go up when everybody's afraid they're going to get grandfathered in like before, and they can start buying firearms of a certain type. And yes, the people who manufacture like Smith & Wesson are going to go through the roof really quickly. Yeah, invest in it, because that shit's going to jump real hard, real quick, and then you can sell out real hard, real quick. I don't want to describe evil motives to everybody, but the point there.
I ascribe evil motives to anyone who makes a lot of money off of a mass shooting. I don't know how to get around that. Sorry.
They're not. They didn't cause the mass shooting. Anyway. Aside from that, we're getting away from what I was trying to say, is that firearms have not changed in composition or type in 40 or 50 years. We've had semi-automatic high-capacity assault rifles since before the AR-15/M16 variant. The M14 was a copy of the Mini 14, and that's where we came up with the 223/556 round, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, that's been around since a couple of years after the Texas shooting, the University of Texas shooting, and that's not changing.
Well, yeah, okay. The difference today is popularity and accessibility. That's generally what I'm getting.
And that's what I was getting at, is that the NRA contributes to that.
The technology has been around for a super long time. I get that. It's not really contentious.
It's not really technology on that end, though, because you could. There was no end to fulfilling orders if you wanted to order them. The difference is the NRA pushed this as a propaganda thing. Obama and the liberals are taking your gun. Buy. Increase the market share. Go. And that became the problem.
And so what do we do now? I have no idea what's going on Anthony's thing here.
Well, I have a question. James, did I hear you
And we were getting ready to wrap, by the way. Sorry, Melissa, go ahead.
Did I hear you use the term crunchy liberal earlier?
Yes. That's one of my favorites.
That's what I thought I heard you say.
Indeed. I love my hippie crunchy liberals.
It immediately made me want granola.
Yeah, that's the joke. Yes, fruits, flakes, and nuts, right? Yeah, I've heard that too. Really doesn't have a place here, but
really, sure. I mean, the real danger here is the NRA, or not just the NRA, but this entire pushing of this message.
Basically, you're talking about gun culture in America, the mug guns.
I wouldn't say that, man. I would say that you're drawing people in with the idea that if you don't buy now, you won't be able to own them. And we've been doing it for 30 years.
Right, but also you cannot deny the fact that it makes people feel powerful to own a firearm that's capable of mass destruction. You know, and that's attractive to people, especially people who feel, you know, like they're not getting their due in society. They're not getting their due in life. A guy like this who was seriously, to go back to the psychology of this guy, and again, conjecture on my point, that somebody who was under the radar in every way possible his entire life, as far as we know. How do you know this isn't a guy who harbored resentment, who harbored anger and hatred?
And I asked you the question, how do you know this guy wasn't set up and it wasn't a frame job and some black flag operator or false flag operation? I mean, we're speculating. It's bullshit, is my point.
But we all know people who are like this, though. People who harbor anger.
Do you really know people who buy anything even close to an assault rifle or semi-automatic weapon who only own one because they hate people and like, I can't wait till I can fucking unload this on someone's face? Like,
I think you're jumping the gun. I mean, I think that's like, no pun intended.
My hands up. My hands up, James.
Man, that's what I'm saying. That's the important thing we're trying to do.
All I'm saying is that, like, David's right. We all know people who are disgruntled and feel like they haven't gotten, you know, whatever they're entitled to or whatever, and are dissatisfied.
Sure.
And stockpiling guns, like, may be a new hobby, might be an old one, but, you know, like, kind of the obsession with guns, like, maybe it's new, maybe it's not. I mean, he had a lot of them, so I'm guessing it's been a while.
I've purchased, I think, 6 guns in my entire life.
Yeah, but then you have to, you have to go through, I mean, you have, like, what, 20 in his room? Like,
oh, not that guy. I thought you meant me. I thought you were talking to me. I was like, I have almost 100 firearms, but I've only purchased 6 myself. They're all.
It's always about you.
I thought you were talking about.
Siobhan, he's a libertarian. It's always about him.
Whoa! I'm a libertarian too.
I had to. I'm sorry.
No, let's let the ATF handle this. That's cool. I gotta make another drink. You guys have fun. I'm listening.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, yeah, like.
I'm saying there's an element of anger and empowerment from owning something that is, you know, a devastating weapon. You know, it's not for nothing that has a psychological effect on people. You know, again, I'm not suggesting I'm going to do anything dangerous. I bought a gun because I was angry, and I go to the range, and it's cathartic to shoot. It really is. It makes you feel good. You get to literally and figuratively unload when you do that. I think, you know, there's something to that. But for some people, that's not enough. You know, for some people.
You know what? I'm really sorry, David, that you did not get to hang out with my brother when he was in town right before my dad and I went to Europe, because he brought an AK-47 over from North Carolina, and they went shooting. You would have enjoyed playing with that one, I'm sure.
I would have loved to, and I would really. My problem is I don't have the time to go to the range. You know, it's not even so much a money factor for buying ammunition. It's like I tend to work later hours, and I don't get to go because most of the time they're closed by the time I get out there.
Yeah,
so neither here nor there. I don't get to be as proficient as I want to. So really, it's just for absolute self-defense, which I almost needed the other night, which I told James, but that's an aside. Someone knocked on my door at 4:30 in the morning, like last Saturday. Like, that was tense. But anyway, back to this. Back to the meta level, just so we can put a bow on this thing. You know, we're not talking about just the psychology of this guy, because again, it's conjecture. We don't know why he did it. You know, but there are multiple factors that go into why these things happen, both with regards to mass shootings and as well as the general problem of gun violence, domestic violence, suicide, accidental shootings. we've decided as a society tacitly that we're okay with this, and I think that needs to be something that must be revisited. And it's Second Amendment, those are my rights, constitutional carry for everybody. That I don't think that's a solution that works really at all, and it's a deflection, I think. We don't necessarily have all good answers here because we're conflating what happens generally versus what's happened specifically in Las Vegas. And I know that was essentially the topic of tonight, but they're connected too. And I think most of us have had a pretty non-emotional sort of response to this, and I think that's pretty good in terms of at least having the conversation about what do we do, how do we move forward, how do we stop this, how do we curb it. And I think that's really the real situation, is that what we can do is curb this. We can mitigate. There are things we can do, things like bump stocks and these crank gun modifiers. We can remove those from legality. We can make new guns that we manufacture. We can make smart guns that I don't know how far you want to go with that, but there's technology available that I think would make abuse of firearms more difficult. We can make new guns manufactured more difficult to make illegal, modifications on. I think these things are within the realm of possibility. This is what we need to be focused on. Things that will mitigate, things that will reduce as a trend the level of gun violence. I don't know if we'll ever eliminate it, so long as we have a constitutional amendment, giving us the right to bear arms. There's only so far we can take it.
You're absolutely right.
Does anybody else have any closing comments here? Because this is the time.
Just say that I don't think it's just about. I think that regulation and kind of changing technology and all that are all great ideas, but also I don't want to push aside the other things that can help us mitigate this that are not necessarily related to gun regulation.
Yeah.
That don't get as much publicity.
Like mental health stuff. Is that sort of what you're getting at? Yeah.
That, and just.
It's not just it, but
not just that, but yeah.
I'm just gonna go ahead and punt with Siobhan's on that. She was right on the money. I think there's a lot to this, a lot more than just any kind of gun regulation or mental health regulation. I think putting this on mental health is way too much to be shouldered for one burden or one thing. Like, this isn't just a mental health problem. This is a multifaceted issue, and I'm just going to go with Siobhan on that. She was right.
Oh my God, I should rip into you more often.
Bitch! No.
It's completely productive, apparently.
Swear to God!
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are social issues. We've talked about them extensively on the thread, especially with respect to domestic violence and kind of preventative situations from getting to the point where they come to.
And I do think that some sensible gun regulations are going to have to be involved.
And I apologize if my offering this evening was a little bit too slanted toward the mental health care and the behavioral health care side of things. Given my background, my education, when something like this is the topic of discussion, that's kind of where I'm pulled. That's where obviously my education leads me, or my experience takes me. So I appreciate having the opportunity to kind of give that input, even if it was something that wasn't necessarily,
And Melissa,
I don't think we're trying to diminish that at all. I think what we're trying to say is that that's absolutely something that we should look into and work on. I just hesitate to say that that's anything.
I'm in no way saying that that's the solution. No, I'm saying that it's a puzzle with many pieces.
Right. And I think just hesitating to blame too much on that, since at least one other person has brought it up on the site.
I was going to say, and Melissa, I think I think your analysis is spot on, and I think we all kind of tried to sit back a little bit and let other people speak, because we had a huge amount of people on here. We have 8 or 10 people that joined us. I think everybody contributed a little bit in their own way, but I think your contribution was wonderful, and I appreciate you doing that.
Cheers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone who came out, especially people, our first timers tonight. We had Amanda, who was here briefly, I think, before we actually went live. Don and Anthony coming out.
Clarence.
And Clarence, yes, for offering their insights and their perspectives. You know, there's a wide political range here, and we all got to talk like reasonable people because we're all interested in solutions rather than just the normal partisan BS that is pervasive so many other places in the dialogue today. This is what fermenting is all about. I think it's been good, and I hope we continue this conversation as we find out more about what happened in Vegas, the motivations, and to have some damn solutions, because what happened is not acceptable. Okay, we're failing as a society. It's not acceptable. We need to find a better way, and I think we all realize that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call it. This has been Fermenting Opinions. This has been some somber ferment with a little bit of humor interspersed. But thank you all for coming out. I'm David Poseidon. That's James McVeigh. And that is going to be it for